Okay, so that music courtesy or in tribute to Alex Trebek. Okay, so we're going to finish chapter 5 today, and we're going to start with chapter 6. And as you know, our days are numbered already. I realize our third exam will be on Tuesday next week, and then we have the practice exam on Thursday. Okay, so the coverage of the third exam is chapter 9, 10, and 11. Not chapter 9, 10, and 5. And we're going to finish that coverage today. Your OWL, chapter 10, will end on Thursday. And your OWL, chapter 5, will end on Tuesday. Okay, before the exam. Okay, so without further ado, let's finish chapter 5. So we continue last time with our chapter 5 with the Dalton's law of partial pressure, where the total pressure of a mixture of gases is just the total or the sum of all the partial pressure of each individual gas. And then we also discuss the effect of water. Okay, when you collect gas over water, you have to take into consideration that the water also exert its own partial pressure, but not as big as the gases that you collect over water. Now we end up, I think, if not mistaken, we started with the KMT. KMT is your kinetic molecular theory. Okay, and then root mean squared is the one that we end up, which is a calculation where you're given equation on how to solve the problem. And we say the speed is dependent on the temperature and indirectly dependent on the molar mass of the gas. Okay, so the kinetic molecular theory, as I told you, that is the model that describes the behavior of the gases. So it tries to explain why gases behave that way. And that will be useful in chapter 11, because right now the kinetic molecular theory just describes the gases. But when we go to chapter 11, we will discuss the behavior of the liquid and solid with respect to the kinetic molecular theory. Okay, now when we look at the relationship of temperature with respect to the speed of gases, so Maxwell distribution predicted this relationship. So this is the relative number of molecules at 0 degrees Celsius. So as you could see, the molecular speed that it has is around here. But if you increase it to 500 degrees Celsius, most of them increases in terms of their speed. And there's a greater distribution, okay, with respect to the relative number of the molecules. So what does this tells us, this Maxwell distribution? It just tells us that the speed is dependent on the temperature. So the higher the temperature, the higher, or we could say the faster is the speed of the molecules. Okay. Now, in addition to this, we go to the process called diffusion. And later you will have the other process known as effusion. Okay. So how are they the same and how are they different? So when you're talking about diffusion, okay, so when you're talking about this diffusion, usually you look at how gas is spread out. Okay, so this is the process whereby a gas is spread out through another gas to occupy the space uniformly. So I like you to look at the photo here. So what's the difference of the first photo and the second photo? Anyone can show the difference? Why are they different? What's the difference between the two? Hmm? How are they differ? So if you're going to look at the first one, so you could see this is what? A filter paper or a litmus paper. So this is before the ammonia evaporated above it. So all of them are red. But once ammonia starts to evaporate, you could see that the litmus paper becomes blue, which only means that some of the ammonia travels to it. Okay? Or the way that they look at it, this is oxygen and nitrogen. So if you're going to put it here, you don't see the diffusion. Okay? Because oxygen and nitrogen, they're not basic. Okay? Or if ever they're acidic, what will happen? Your litmus paper will get moist. So we all know molecules of gas, they're not stationary. Based on this kinetic molecular theory, they are in constant random motion. Okay? So what do you think is the other example of diffusion? Let's say we are in an in-person class. What's the classic example of diffusion? Anyone? One classic example is diffusion if someone were or have a perfume that smells so strong. Okay, so the smell that spread around the room, that is an example of diffusion. Okay, so there you could see that there's a spread out of molecules. This time, these are the one responsible for the, I don't know, good odor of the perfume. I'm not sure about it because sometimes me, if the perfume is so strong, I get allergic, and sometimes I don't like the smell. Okay, but that's just an example of this what we call the diffusion. Okay, so diffusion, aside from spread out, we could say that's just the gradual mixing of gases due to the motion of their component particle, even in the absence of mechanical agitation. Okay, so you just open a container of perfume, then okay, everyone can smell it. Or if somebody release some gas, okay, everyone can also smell it. So maybe that's one advantage that we have in a Zoom class. We don't experience that thing. Okay, so that is diffusion. Now, effusion, on the other hand, okay, sometimes you thought that they're the same, but usually they're only, we could say, similarity is the molecules of the gas spread out or travel. Okay, but if you're going to look at the effusion, look at this. The process by which a gas flows through a small hole in a container. Okay, so example that they put here is the pinprick in the balloon. So when you look at the what we call effusion, it is a related process for diffusion, but this is just like an escape of a gas molecule through a small, sometimes microscopic hole, such as the one that we observed in balloons. Okay, but if we're going to look at this behavior that gases has, in effusion and diffusion, these are summarized by Graham's law of effusion. So this is another gas law. So as I have told you now, there are a lot of natural laws that were developed for the gas phase. Okay, so what does this Graham's law of diffusion tells us? So it tells us that the rate of a gaseous substance is inversely proportional to the square root of its molar mass. So if you have the rate of effusion, the ratio of the effusion rates of two gases is the square root of the inverse ratio of their molar masses. So if we're going to look at the formula that we have here, okay, so this is if you only have one, but if you want to relate them, oh God, I'm just going to let this go. Okay, so if we just look at this, the rate of A over the rate of B equals to the square root of the molar mass of B over the molar mass of A. So this is the equation that we have. This is derived from this one. So it says here, at constant temperature and pressure, the rate of effusion of gas molecule through a particular hole is inversely proportional to the square root of the molecular mass of the given gas. So let's try to solve a problem here. So both hydrogen and helium had been used as the buoyant gas in blimps. If a small leak were to occur, which gas would effuse more rapidly and by what factor? Okay, so we have here a situation wherein we have two gases. So what is blimp? Are you familiar with blimp? Are you watching the Yankees game? So usually when they have a game in Bronx, there's usually the Goodyear blimp above them. So what we have here is both hydrogen and helium that are used. So usually the one that they use for this big balloon is either hydrogen and helium, but they would prefer helium because there's some problem with the hydrogen. It can be combustible. Okay. So if you're going to look at this, what we call gases that we have here in terms of helium and hydrogen, you are asked which of them would effuse rapidly and by what factor. Okay, and if you're going to look, the helium one is the one that gives you the Donald Duck thing. Okay, so if you're asked by what factor, so how are we going to solve this? So we could put the rate of H2 over rate of HE, and then we just put there. How are we going to do it? What will I put here? Molar mass of what? So this one is, anyone?
Helium.
This is H.
E.
E. And this is H2. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to replace it with the molar mass. So if we're going to change it, what do we have? The rate is still here. But what we have here now, you have what? 4 over 2. So how do we get this? 4 divided by 2 is equals to 2. So we could say the rate of H2 with respect to the rate of HE is by square root of 2. What is the square root of 2? Equal to. Anyone? What is the square root of 2?
1.41.
Okay, 1.41.
41.
So what does it tells us? So if the rate of the HE is 1, the rate of the H2 is 1.41. So that's what we call means. So that means H2 travels 1.4 times faster than HE. Everybody got that? So before we go to the last topic that we have here, I'd like to show you something. I hope the commercial will not be, not this one. I'm going to share this to you. So I'll try to find another one. Hexafluoride. This one, I think this is a much good one.
All right, so here's what's happening. There's a boring. It's inert. It's odorless.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's normally boring, but here, watch this. I'm going to slowly pull the lid off.
Okay.
So that should be perfect. Gary, would you take that little end off over there as well? You see that? Just, yeah.
Yes,
All right,
indeed.
so let's see if it feels pretty good. So let's see if we can float the boat. Okay. Ready? So here we go. Let's see if we can float the boat. Stay there, little guy. Tell me that's not awesome. Isn't that amazing?
Cool.
And
That is
as close to
awesome.
magic
Yeah.
as you can. So is that, no, it's okay. Push it around. It's
That's
okay. So this
crazy.
heavy gas is about 6 times heavier than the air that we breathe. And so I just have it coming through a tube here. And so I'm going to give us just a little bit more so you can kind of see what's going on. Here's what they
Okay.
use it for. Electrical engineers will flood a room or part of a semiconductor or something with this material because it doesn't allow electricity to, it doesn't conduct electricity. So here's a taser.
Yeah.
So all right, so look, so here's the taser. So when I put the taser down inside, here, watch this. When I put it down inside, it stops.
Oh, it stops working.
And then when I bring it back out again,
Oh, wow.
so they will keep it. So if you don't want something for arcing from one place to
Doesn't
another.
conduct
But the coolest
electricity.
thing is this:
Right.
because it's inert, you can breathe it, and you might see something different. Ready? So
Can
come
I
here.
go first?
So
Yeah.
just stick your head way down inside and breathe in. Breathe in. Ready? Now talk to the nice people. Try it. Come here. Get in there.
Awesome.
All right. So,
My name is
Amelia, Becky, get in here. Kyle, get in here.
That is
Get in there.
awesome.
Breathe some. Ready? So breathe it in. Take a big. Don't waste it. All right. Here you go. Now talk. Isn't that crazy? Think about it.
So sexy when you talk like
Isn't that
that.
crazy?
Oh my goodness.
Give us a sexy little
Now we
talk, right? Give me. There you go. Ready?
Hello, everybody.
That wild. Come on, Kyle. Go with me. Ready? Here we go. Ready?
okay now.
No, just
Maybe
breathe in like
you're
this.
familiar with this
Breathe out.
phenomena
See,
here.
okay, breathe in.
La, 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 la.
See, now we're okay.
Now we're okay.
Yeah.
What do you call that? The Darth Vader voice? Or maybe I can put like the last one here. No, not that one. Hexafluoride.
Now that we've helped people customize and save with Liberty Mutual, we can finally do some beach reading.
So this is just an example on how gas can affect us. It depends on the molar mass that you have. So molar mass, usually they move slowly, slower compared to the one that has lower molar mass. So that's the Graham's law of diffusion. So the last one that we have here is the real gases. So everything that we have discussed is just about ideal gas. Okay, so when we're talking about ideal gas, okay, usually we're talking about low pressure system, because at high pressure, what happens? The relationship between the pressure and the volume does not follow the Boyle's law. So if you have an ideal gas, usually you have it like this. But once you have a real gas, you could see there's a large deviation that they have. Okay. So what happens usually if the pressure increases? So if the pressure increases, you have a volume there, most likely there's an interaction that happens. So when you have an ideal gas, it can only be achieved if you have a low pressure and the other one is high temperature. Okay. So ideal gas, we could say, is just a concept. It's just a way to tell us what if the gas behave ideally. But what's the problem? Okay, what's the problem? We live in a world that is real. We don't live in an ideal world. Okay, if we live in an ideal world, we don't have a problem right now in the White House. Okay, I'm thinking giving you plus 10 points in your exam if that guy concede in the election. But I don't think that will happen. So I'm just giving you a no hope on that proposal. Okay. So as I've told you, we don't live in an unreal world. We live in a real gas. So usually the gas behave really. Okay. So the way that they try to put the ideal gas is, okay, if we have this ideal system, this is how the gases behave. But unfortunately, that's not how it behaves. So it says here, at high pressure, some of the assumptions in your kinetic molecular theory is not longer true. For instance, postulate 1, at high pressure, the volume of the gas molecules is not negligible. So at high pressure, what happened? The molecules become close to one another. The volume that they have is so close, and you can measure them now. It's not negligible anymore. Okay, and that results also in the second item that we have here. At high pressure, it is possible that you will already have an intermolecular forces. Okay, so what differentiates the gas from the solid and the liquid? The gas don't have the intermolecular forces. The solid and the liquid that are known as fluids, okay, they have intermolecular forces. That's the one that hold them together. And you can achieve it at high pressure, because at high pressure, you're compressing the thing. So when you're compressing the thing, the volume becomes so small in such a way that the gas molecules can interact with one another. to the point some of them are already liquefied. When we say liquefied, they turn into liquid. So how are you going to take into account the change in this, what we call real gases? So van der Waals developed an equation that still takes into consideration the ideal gas equation. So ideal gas equation is PV equals to nRT. So the van der Waals equation that is similar to the ideal gas equation, but it includes two constants, A and B. And this account the deviations from ideal behavior. So what happened there, your volume becomes B minus NB. So B is a constant. And there is the number of moles. And the term P there becomes P plus N squared A over B squared. So if you're going to look at this thing here, you will see this is expanded because of this. But if you can look at it, it's still like a PB equals to nRT. You only take into account some of these deviations that you have. So A and B, they're usually given for a given gas. So they were able to determine what those constant values is or values are in a given gas. So I leave you with this problem, okay? So it says there, use the van der Waals equation to calculate the pressure exerted by 2 moles of carbon dioxide that has a volume of 10 liters at 25 degrees Celsius. And then you compare this value with the pressure obtained from the ideal gas law. So if you're going to look at this, okay, we can solve it first using the ideal gas equation and then using the van der Waals. So if we're going to use here the ideal gas equation, what do we do? PV equals to nRT. So you're asked for what? Calculate the pressure. So we could say it's like this. And if we're going to look at here, so this is 2 moles. And then the 0.08 206 liter atmosphere K-mol times temperature 25 plus 273, 298 divided by the volume, which is 10 liter. And what do you get? So the unit that will be left there is atmosphere because K, liter, mole, mole. So I want you to calculate it while I set up the other one. So if you're going to look at it, okay, the original one that we have is P B minus NB times B. Just want to make sure. I think I messed up. B minus NB. P plus N squared A over, is that B squared? I'm just trying to make sure that it's right. And then you have here B minus NB. And you have nRT on this side. So what do you get here? Anyone? How many atmosphere?
Uh, 4.89.
4.89. So let's see how far it is when we use the van der Waals. So I'm going to provide you the original thing here, and I'm going to provide you the A and the B value. Okay, so if we're going to rearrange this, what will happen? So I leave the P on one side and then I have the nRT. And then maybe B minus NB on this side because I'm going to divide both sides. And then I'm going to what? Subtract both sides with N squared A over B. So I'm going to use the same thing that I have there, 2 moles, 0.08206 liter atmosphere K mole, 298. And then here, I will have 10 liters minus 2 moles times, so this is the value for that 0.04286 liter per mole, okay? And then subtract it with, what do I have there? N squared, so that's 2 moles. And the A value is 3.658. Liter squared atmosphere mole divided by 10 liter. Did I miss something? The B squared here. So if we're going to look at the unit, mole, K, liter, okay? You end up with an atmosphere. And just to put the shortcut of it, this is how you get the value. This is the value that you will obtain. So how far is it from the ideal gas equation? 0.1 atmosphere, which in atmosphere we could say is not negligible. And with chapter 5 done, I open up 2 quizzes that you have until Thursday to work on. One is concept, the other one calculations.
Professor?
Yeah.
Do we need to use Respondus for those quizzes?
No.
Okay.
The one that you have, the Respondus, is the practice exam. That will be, you will do it by the weekend. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
So the Respondus will be the practice exam and exam 3 on Tuesday next week. So question with chapter 5 before we proceed with the last chapter of the course. Question? So we go to the last chapter, and we could say one of the abstract one, thermochemistry. So if we go to this chapter, we're going to deal with a concept that's a little bit abstract. we're going to deal with the concept of energy. So in our introductory chapter, we define chemistry as the study of matter and the changes it undergo. So in the changes that it undergo, it's always associated with energy. And when we're talking about energy, usually it's an abstract concept. Okay. When we feel, we could say tired, we always say we're out of energy. Okay. Now, energy, unlike matter, is known and recognized to have its effect. It cannot be seen, touched, smelled, or weighed, unlike matter. But we know it's there. It's always there. So let's look at some of the concepts that we have. So we have this thermodynamics and how is it related to thermochemistry. So when we look at thermodynamics, this is the science of the relationship between heat and other forms of energy. Thermochemistry, this is an area in thermodynamics that concerns the study of heat absorbed or evolved by a chemical reaction. So we could say this is a larger area of knowledge compared to this one. Okay, but what combines the two is the word thermo, which is just from the word thermos, that means heat. So if you're going to look at the thermodynamics here, this is the heat and other forms of energy. So what are some forms of energy that you know? Okay. There are different forms of energy. Now, the one that we're going to deal is the one that deals with chemistry. So when we're talking about chemistry, it's the one that we deals in chemical reaction. So if you're going to look at the different forms of energy, okay, you could say that not all energy are related to or relevant to chemistry. So if we're going to look at the definition of energy, we could say it's the potential or capacity to move matter. So this is in what we call larger perspective. So one form of energy can be converted to another form, okay, of energy. So like electromagnetic, mechanical, electrical, or chemical. So if we're going to look at these different forms of energy, in one way or another, they supply you energy. But the only one that is really related to chemistry is the chemical energy, the one that is happening involving chemical reaction. Okay, so if you have this energy, and this energy, usually is just associated of producing energy. So when you're talking about electromagnetic, it's a combination of electric and magnets. Okay, so that's the radiation that we have, the electromagnetic radiation that we have studied. It's a form of energy because if you use it, you apply it to a molecule, the molecule can absorb it, okay? Or the molecule can excite some of the atoms or molecules within a particular substance. So when we're talking about mechanical energy, so you have here some machine that you develop, okay, that in a way can convert one form of energy to another. Electrical energy, the same thing. Okay, but the one that we're going to look is the chemical energy. And then the next thing that we're going to look is kinetic, potential, and internal energy. And maybe you're going to look at the concept, is heat and temperature the same? What can you say? What energy is associated with heat and temperature?
Thermal energy.
Huh?
Thermal energy.
Thermal energy. Okay, but in what way are they the same or different? Okay, so when we're talking about heat, usually it is associated to the transfer of thermal energy between two bodies that are of different temperature. Temperature, on the other hand, is a measure of thermal energy. And take into consideration that temperature is not thermal energy, okay? Temperature is a measure of thermal energy. It is not thermal energy. So maybe that's one way to distinguish the two. Okay, one, okay, heat is the transfer of thermal energy from two bodies of different temperatures. So temperature is a measure of thermal energy, because those are the stuff that we're going to deal in this chapter, temperature and heat. Now we go to the type of energy that we have. So we have two. One that is known as kinetic energy, or the energy in motion. So this is the energy associated with an object by virtue of its motion. And you already encountered this formula before. Kinetic energy is just 1/2 times mass times velocity squared. And what's the SI unit of energy?
Joules.
You might come up with your multiple choice. So it is joules, joule, okay? So if you're going to look at this, it's kilogram times meter squared over second squared.
Professor, could you go to the last slide for a second?
So another, what we call the unit that we use, but not the SI unit, commonly used is the calorie. Where do you see this calorie?
In food, but it's usually
Food.
higher base.
Okay, so the food that you have there, it tells you the amount of energy that it gives you if you eat the food. So calorie is a non-SI unit, but it is commonly used by chemists. It was originally defined as the amount of energy required to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius. So how are the two related? For every 1 calorie, you have 4.184 joules. So if you have some problem here associated with the kinetic energy, like a person weighing 75 kilograms or 165 pounds runs a course at 1.78 meters per second, or 4.00 miles per hour, what is the person's kinetic energy? And all you need to do is use the formula. So that's 1/2 times 75 kilogram times 1.78 meters per second squared. And if you're going to look at the unit, it will be kilograms meters squared over S squared, which is joule. And what's the number that you got?
118.8.
100? What do you got?
118.8.
118.78 or 119, because you have 3 significant figures here, 3 significant figures here. 119 joules. So that's kinetic energy. Now, how about potential energy? So if you're going to look at potential energy, it's the energy an object has by virtue of its position in a field of force such as gravitational, electric, or magnetic field. So if you're going to look at the equation for it, it looks like this. mass times gravitational constant times height. And if you're going to look at the unit, that's kilogram times meter per second squared times meter. So it will give you the same unit as the one that you have in kinetic energy. Okay, so they said usually the kinetic and the potential energy converts from one form to another, right? If you have a ball in a hill, so at this position, the energy is potential, but once it starts to move, it converts to kinetic energy. And once it stops, it goes back to potential energy. So that's how they look at the conversion from potential energy to kinetic energy and then potential energy. Now let's look at the other one because I put there three: kinetic, potential, and the last one is internal energy. So if you're going to look at the internal energy, this is the sum of the kinetic and potential energies of the particles making up a substance. Okay, so if you're going to look at them, if you're going to add everything, you have here the total energy. So try to look, for instance, if you have water in a dam. What do you have there in water? Water has what? Kinetic energy, potential energy. Now, if you're going to look at the composition of water, what does it have? Water is made up of what? What is H2O? Water is made up of molecules. Okay, in addition to that, they are made up of smaller particles like electrons, protons, neutrons. So if you're going to look at the total energy of the quantity of a water, okay, it equals everything in it. The potential energy and the kinetic energy that the water has. Okay, you know, a dam is what we call one way to generate energy, like what we do in the Niagara Falls. It's a good source of energy. So the way that they do is they control the flow of the water, and when the water starts to flow out of a dam, they can generate electricity out of it. Okay, so if you're going to look at that, internal energy, that's the one that you have there, especially if you have a particle in a substance. That's the one that made up a given substance. So if you look at total energy, it's just the quantity of water equals to all the particles that you have. Okay, so if you look at any substance in a lab, you could say it is at rest. So what's the energy that they have there? If you have lab, look at the lab, there's some substance there. Usually they're at rest. So what's the energy that you have there? You don't have kinetic energy, but you have potential energy. Okay, and you can take it to be constant. Now, if you change the temperature, what happened? Your potential energy changes. Your kinetic energy also changes. Okay, so you consider all of them. Once this move, once in position, and one that is made up the particles that you have in a given substance, it gives you all the total energy. Okay. Now, the law of conservation of mass, I told you in the rolling of the ball, the energy can be created from one form to another, but the total quantity of energy remains constant. So here are other terms that we need to know the system and the surroundings. So if you're going to look at the system, what it is, so the system is the one that you're interested. As mentioned here, the system is the substance under study in which a change occurs. Okay, and it's called the thermodynamic system, or just the system. Now, surroundings, that is the one that is everything around the system. So if we're talking about system, that's the specific part of the universe that is of interest in the study. So in the chemical reaction, the system that you have is the reaction itself. And anything around the reaction is the surroundings. So surroundings plus system will give you what? So usually in other book, they put this system, and the one then that you have is surrounding. But what do you call everything here? What do you call them? You call them you and I, or the universe. Okay, so this is the one that you study. And the way that you're going to look at this is how exchange will come in. So what are the possible exchanges that we can have here? If we have the system and the surroundings, I'm just going to erase that thing so I can go back here. So if you're going to look at this exchange, there are three exchanges that you need to consider, okay, between the system and the surrounding. When you have an open system, what is the exchange that you have? There is an exchange in energy and matter. So an open system is one wherein there's an exchange of energy and matter. So just remember me, okay? E for Elmer, or M for Mojica. Or as they say, remember M, remember E, and you remember me, okay? Now, another system that you have wherein only one of them is allowed to exchange is the closed system. Which do you think is the one that is exchanged? Energy or matter? In a closed system, which is possible? Which one is possible to be exchanged? Anyone? You have to choose between the two here. In a closed system, only the energy can exchange between the system and the surrounding. So what does it mean? This has something to do where whether you're going to have a warm or cold system. But the matter will not change, okay? And the last one that we have is an isolated system when there is no exchange between energy or matter. Classic example of an isolated system is your what? The one that keep your coffee warm. That is an example of the isolated system, a Dewar plus, as they call it. So it will remain hot or it will remain cold, okay? Now, if we're going to look at the system and the surrounding, as you can see here, there's always an exchange in energy and in the open, the closed system. What is the form of this energy? We have here the so-called heat. So the energy that we have here, one of them is heat, and the other one you will know later on. So what is heat? So heat is the one that flows in and out of a system. It is possible because of the difference in temperature between the system and its surrounding. Remember when we differentiate heat versus temperature? So when we say heat, heat is the transfer of thermal energy between difference in temperature. And if you're going to look at here, heat flows spontaneously from a region of temperature to a region of lower temperature. That's why you call it heat, right? Because it's always from hot to cold. What do you think the term will be if it's from cold to hot object? Coldness? Okay. So when you say heat, usually it's the spontaneous flow from higher temperature to lower temperature. So you say heat is positive if heat is absorbed by the system. Heat is negative if heat is evolved by a system. And if you associated this heat with a reaction, you call it heat of a reaction. I don't know because we don't have this in-person lab. But some substances, when you put them in water, you form warm solution. Some substances, when you put them in water, it becomes cold. Or we have this so-called hot packs and cold packs. So what do you do when you have the hot packs and the cold packs? You just break them and then you allow the reaction to take place. So some of them absorb heat, some of them release heat. So that is the heat of reaction. The value of Q required to return a system to a given temperature at the completion of the reaction at a given temperature. And this term, the endo and the exothermic. I don't know if this is new to you, okay? But if you're going to look at this process, I think the best way for you to remember is the first two letters there. So it says there, endothermic, a chemical reaction or process in which heat is absorbed by the system, or one where its Q is positive. And what happened there, the reaction vessel will feel full. Because what happened, the reaction vessel that you have, that's your surroundings. So the system get the heat from the surrounding, or the surrounding gives the heat to the system. Or the way that you can remember there, you see this heat enter the system. So the reaction that you have there, that's the one that is endothermic. So if you're going to feel the surrounding, it will be cold because the system absorbed the heat of the surrounding. Now, exothermic, on the other hand, this is a chemical reaction or process in which the heat is evolved by the system. So what you have there, Q is negative. So the reaction vessel will feel warm. So what's the example that we have here? Okay, in an exothermic reaction. So usually what happened here, the surroundings that you have will become warm because the heat exits the system. Now I'm going to put or give some process here and tell me what is the process. Is it endo or exo? Let's say melting. Is it endo or exo?
And
Exo.
Exo.
So remember, melting, you look at the reaction, water, water. Do you need heat or you don't need heat in the system? Does heat need to enter the system or heat need to be released from the system?
Enter the system.
Huh?
Enter the system.
Okay. So for the reaction to occur, you need the heat to enter the system. So that means this is
Endothermic.
endothermic reaction. So you have to what we could understand the perspective that we have here. Okay. So I'm asking you here now, if you look at the reaction, that is your system, do you need the heat? Or do the heat need to enter the system or the heat need to exit the system? So if you're going to look at this, you need heat on this side for that to happen. Okay, so that is the endothermic process. So if you're going to look at the next slide, it tells you the other endothermic reaction. So the reaction vessel cools, heat is absorbed, energy is added to the system, and then Q is positive. In an exothermic reaction, the reaction vessel warms, heat is evolved, and energy is subtracted from the system, and Q is negative. So try to remember that. Okay? Now, how about if we do it like condensation of water? So what is that? H2O gas going to H2O liquid. So what do you need here? Where's heat? Where's the energy? If you want to condense your gas molecules to liquid. Because that's the only one for you to understand if it's an exo or an endothermic reaction.
Exothermic.
Okay. So you have a gas molecule here. You want to convert it to liquid molecule. Do you need the heat to enter the system or you need the heat to be released out of the system? That's the question. You have to convince yourself. So you want the gas to be what? Liquid. So you want it to be cold. So if you want it to be cold, you don't need the energy. You want the energy to be removed. So that means the energy that you have is here. That makes this what? Endo-exo. Anyone?
Exo.
Exo.
Okay, that makes this exo. So that's your guide. Now, for you to understand the concept that you have, whether you have an endothermic or an exothermic reaction, the concept that's related to that is enthalpy. So if it's a positive, it's endo. If it's a negative value, it's an exothermic reaction. And this is an extensive property of a substance that can be used to obtain the heat that is absorbed, making it endo, or evolved, making it exo, in a chemical reaction. And they said enthalpy is an extensive property. So when you say extensive property, the more materials that you have, the greater is the enthalpy. The less material that you have, the less is the amount of the enthalpy. So this is a property that depends on the amount of substance. Now, in addition to that, enthalpy is also a state function. So when we're talking about the state function, okay, it's a property that are determined by the state of the system, regardless of how that condition was achieved. Or as written here in the slide, this is a property of a system that depends only on its present state, and which is determined by variables such as temperature and pressure, and it's independent of any previous history of the system. What does it mean? I don't know where you are, okay? As long as 12:10, 12:15, we are together in Zoom. Because that's the what we call present state that we're looking for. And the way this is best, what we call shown is by the next slide here. So they said here, the altitude of a campsite is a state function. Whether you pass through this way or through that way, what is important? You just go to the campsite. So if we're doing it in person, okay, usually we meet at Pace. So the way I look at the state function is, I don't care how you reach Pace University. You want to go there by swimming, taking the subway, riding a bicycle, as long as you're going to what we call reach Pace University at the schedule that we have. Okay? What are you doing with Connor there? Connor, are they bullying you? Do I need to report them to the PROD? To the hotline? So that's what we call the state function. So Connor for president 2024. Now, so we go back to the enthalpy, as I told you, right? Since we're dealing with chemical reaction, so we usually associated the enthalpy. We could say enthalpy is just the heat of reaction also, like this one, wherein we look at the change in enthalpy as that the difference between the total enthalpy and the products minus the total enthalpy of the reactant. So you have here now the delta H, which means change in. So if you, as I told you, delta H is just equals to heat at constant pressure. So if we're going to look at this, change in enthalpy, so the way that we look at this, we look at the energy that is associated here, or the enthalpy of the products, and then we subtract it with the enthalpy of the reactants. And usually the difference that we have there, that tells us whether we have an exo or endothermic reaction. So if you're going to look at this, this is your reactants. And after you do the reaction, this becomes your products. And what you're going to do, you look at the difference there. Okay. So what can you say there? Products is what? Greater or less than the reactants in terms of the enthalpy? Based on this one. Which one is greater, the products or the reactants? Enthalpy.
The products.
Okay. So if you're going to look at this, is it the products? Look at this. So this is higher compared to this one. So if that is higher, the reactant is higher than the product. So what is your delta H of the reaction? It's negative. Because if we're going to look at the original thing here, so what happened? This is higher than this one. So if you're going to do this thing, this is lower than this one. Okay, the reactant is higher than the products. You're going to get a negative delta H, which shows here that you have a negative 368.6, which is the amount of energy that is being released. Now, if we're going to look at the enthalpy with the internal energy, so we can start it like this one. What is mu U here? That's your internal energy. So what happened here, if you're going to expand this one at constant pressure, so whatever the change here, like the one that you have here, so you end up with this expression. And then you rearrange this. This is your internal energy. This is your Q. And this now is your W. So what does it mean? Energy is just equals to the heat and the work in a given system. Okay? So why did we call this the work? Is the pressure-volume relationship new to you?
No.
Okay, you learn it from our previous chapter. Okay, so the term negative P times delta V, that's the energy needed to change the volume against the atmospheric pressure. And you call it the pressure work volume. So if you're going to look at this, this is how it looks like. So if you have this reaction, the same reaction that we have earlier, so what happened? You have a sodium metal reacting with water. So when they react, you produce a gas. So what happened to that gas? What happened to your system here? Will it expand or compress? Anyone? Will there be expansion or compression? What do you call this? So when you do the reaction, you produce there your hydrogen, okay? So you end up with an expansion. You end up with a positive change in your volume. So the expansion there means that the hydrogen gas did the work. Okay, it did the work by raising the piston. And if you're going to look at the corresponding work there, it's equals to this one. Now remember, energy is equals to Q plus W. Okay, so in addition to that, there is a corresponding heat that is negative 368.6. And you add the work there that is equals to 2.5. So you might say, why is it a negative there? Because you have a positive delta B. The final B minus the initial B. Why do you have a positive B there? Because you have a greater B in the final state compared to the initial state. So that's a positive times P, which is a negative. It will give you a negative value. Okay? So that's how the energy comes from the heat of the reaction and the work done by the system. And that's how they look at this, what we call reaction. Now, I will end up with the introduction of a thermochemical equation. How this is the same as the equation that we have and how it is different from them. So when we're talking about thermochemical equation, we're just looking at the same balanced chemical equation that we have, that the only difference is you have the enthalpy, or you included the heat of the reaction. Now, how are we going to interpret this value that we have here? So the way that we interpret this is, for every 2 moles of sodium metal reacting with 2 moles of water, you produce 2 moles of NaOH and 1 mole of water. Is this an exo or an endothermic reaction? Anyone?
Exa.
Okay. So this is an exo because you have a negative. Now, what will happen if this is just 1 mole, all of them are 1, and this one is 1/2? What will be the value here? Will it be the same? Will it be 1/2? Will it be twice as the given value here? Anyone? Anyone from the corners movement?
Emission?
Huh?
It's
So
not-
what will happen to the delta H if instead of 2 moles, I just make them all 1 mole here and this one 1/2? Will it be the same? Will it be 1/2? Will it be twice?
It would be the same.
Okay. What is delta H from our discussion earlier? Delta H is what? An extensive property. So what does an extensive property means? So extensive property means it depends on the amount. So if I'm going to make this 1/2 because 1 is 1/2 of 2, this will become 1/2 also. Okay. So I'll end up with that discussion and then we will continue on that next meeting and see what will happen. So the way that I leave you is thermochemical equation. It just tells you whether heat will enter or exit the system. And the amount of heat that will enter or exit the system depends on the amount of the materials that you have. So if you multiply this by 5, you're going to multiply the enthalpy by 5. If you divide this by 2, you're going to divide this by 2. If you're going to reverse the reaction, this will become positive. So that's what the thermochemical equation is. Okay, so question. I think I still have around 3 minutes.
Will we have a study guide for the test?
The study guide is already posted.
Oh,
It's posted since the beginning of the semester.
for exam 3?
Yeah. It's always been there.
Professor, I had a question about the final exam. So it's the same day as the biology final exam?
I don't know what's the biology. Oh, what do you mean? It's the same day?
It's on the 3rd. And
Yeah.
Dr. Kelly said she would not change it. I already
They're
asked her.
10 minutes apart.
So it's December 5?
3rd.
December 3rd.
No, we are on December 5, if I'm not mistaken.
No,
We
it's
have-
not December
December-
3rd. December
Ours is
5th, I think, is a Friday.
Man, I tried to look at.
It's actually a Saturday.
Oh shit, it's December 3. Because we cannot do December 1, it's a study day. I'm begging the other lecturer if I can give it on December 24. So you can enjoy your Thanksgiving, but he said she cannot give it.
Wait, you mean November 24?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
we are ahead compared to the other one.
And like we only have 10 minutes like between both classes, so we don't even have time to like revise or something.
Yeah.
I'll try to talk to her because she gave me the go signal to finish the thing on the 24th. My original idea is I give you the exam on the 24th and those who didn't do well will come on December 3rd to take another exam, but not everyone will be on that. So now that you gave me that reason, I think I have a bargaining chip for her. It's just bargaining, okay? You know there's 2 chemistry courses, right?
Yes.
At the same time as us. And I don't know if you know the students on that side. Okay, since you don't interact outside the campus, most likely you don't know them. But there are 2 what we call chemistry courses. And the idea that I have is, I told her, can we do it before the spring break? And he told me, if you want to go ahead, you go ahead. Now at least I have a bargaining chip, because most likely her student will also have the biology on that day. So we'll see. You will know the answer next meeting, because I have to let her know. Okay? But are you okay if it goes to the 24?
Yeah, that would be much better than like having to do 2 in one day with like being.
I mean, are you prepared to that? That means in 2 weeks. 24 is in 2 weeks. You have the 3rd exam next week, and then next week after that, the final already. So think about it, okay? Because I have to go. Think about it.
Professor, I have one more question. So on Tuesday, we have the chapters 5, 9, and 10. And then on Thursday, it's the practice for 1 through 10, correct?
Yeah. But that's the thing. If we move the thing on the 24th, that practice exam, that's your final exam. There's no more practice exam.
The practice exam is on the 19th.
Yeah, but that's why. But I'm going to make it on the 24th.
Oh, okay.
So I have to talk with the other lecturer first, because I'm not the one who do the final thing. She had more say than me, but she gave me the go signal if I want to go ahead, because my reasoning is I want my students, when they go to the Thanksgiving, that's it. They don't have to worry during the celebrations of their exam a week after. Okay, so we'll talk about that next meeting, but prepare if ever the 24th, if you don't want it to be on December 3. Okay, so see you, because I have to turn off right away. I have to leave the house.
Thank you, Professor.
Bye, Professor.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
2 quizzes, okay, available till Thursday.
Okay, thank you, Professor.
Okay,
I love
thank
you.
Thanks, Professor.
I love you, Dad.
Love you, Professor.
Love
You know,
you.
this is being
Love you
recorded,
too.
huh?
Love you.
Can you pass me? Thank